Soul enters the red chamber, body is outside. In the red chamber, there is love between children and daughters, while outside the red chamber, there is a timeless charm. Some people are determined to enter the park to relieve the nightmare of the 12 golden hairpins, but the protagonist goes against the trend. Isn't tearing down this cage freeing them all? The high culture and martial arts of the temple are tumultuous, and beneath the temple, there is an undercurrent surging. Sigh, there are no outstanding figures, let's see today. P.S. It's not the orthodox worldview of the Red Chamber. It's okay to say it's just a cover-up. According to the research of the Communist Party of China, I probably can't read the Red Chamber. I like to go into the realm of fictional history. Keywords of the novel. No pop-ups in the style of the Red Chamber. Download the complete collection of the Red Chamber style TXT, and read the latest chapters of the Red Chamber style. Chapter 1. Entering the Red Chamber for the first time with warm breeze and getting drunk. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Entering the Red Chamber for the first time with warm breeze and getting drunk opening. Perfect start. Zhou Su opened his eyes and looked up. At this moment, he was lying on an antique shelf bed. The bed has 8 pillars, with a hollow eaves hanging from the roof and 4 clusters of auspicious patterns carved on it. It has a faint fragrance, whether it is wood or aromatherapy. Recall memories from the original body in the mind. De Qian, from the 3rd rank of Xuanwei General, was the military governor of Jiangnan West Road. He was the son of Zhou Suyuan, his mother was Zhou Yu, and his sister was Zhou Jun. The Zhou family was originally just an ordinary family, but the younger sister of Zhou Suyuan's mother, who was also her original aunt, was selected into the palace when she was young and was originally a low-grade beauty. Later, due to his protection of the emperor, who was still a Qianlong, in times of crisis, the Zhou family gradually rose up in rebellion. His aunt is now honored as the Empress Dowager and highly respected by the emperor. Zhou's father also deserves this level of care. He has been fighting on the battlefield for more than 10 years and has been promoted to a 3rd-rank general. Although he is not a wealthy family, Zhou Su is also very satisfied. Time flies every day, and after 30 years, it's finally his turn. At this moment, his mind is buzzing, afraid to move, just afraid of being a dream or a bubble. If he moves, he will have to go back and continue rolling. He just wants to lie down now. Having traveled through such a family background, Zhou Su could only wish to shout, "Hello." After accepting the memory, Zhou Su became foolish. A personal name comes to mind. Lin Ruhai, Jia Zhen, Jiao Yan, Jia Zheng, Jia Shi, this is De Qian, Emperor Shunqing. Red Chamber World. He's a guy who hasn't even watched a few episodes of the Dream of the Red Chamber TV series. Why are you bringing this to him? What made Zhou Su speechless was that this guy seemed to have offended all the favored generation in the Red Chamber, and there was a slight flaw in the beginning. The reason why he was lying in this bed was because he had a fight with Xue Pan from the Xue family yesterday. Not only did he beat Xue Pan, but he also slapped Jia Baoyu who was helping Xue Pan. In the end, I didn't know how to stay unconscious until I was pierced by Zhou Su's soul. That's it, let Xue Pan go. Jia Baoyu also fought, this is a safe protagonist. And this is Ma Baonan, the treasure of the Jia family. When the hatred becomes great, what the hell should we do? Crunch, the sound of another door opening outside made Zhou Su quickly turn his head to look. He saw a light green figure floating and moving, holding a tray in one hand and rolling up a pearl curtain in the other. A crisp and tender female voice came from the other hand, saying, "De Lang has taken medicine." Zhou Su almost said, "If you dare to harm me, my brother will not spare you." As my mind turned, I remembered who this was. The woman was his eldest maid named Li Chuan. The Zhou family had little background and started as a military general. The names of these maids and servants were also very casual. Just because this maid was bought into the mansion at the beginning of spring, she was given such a name. What else are there left? Xiaoman, Bailu, Xiaoxue, and so on. Li Li Chun. Zhou Su let out a cry. Li Chuan had just turned his head and was facing his bright eyes. His eyes were stunned and he shook the tray with his hand, causing it to spill all over the ground. Li Chuan was startled and took a few steps back. When she saw Zhou Su again, a surprise slowly appeared on her face. She quickly took a few steps forward and called out, "De Lang, are you awake?" Zhou Su nodded, and Li Chuan quickly retreated, shouting in surprise as he retreated. "Madam, Miss, De Lang is awake. Come on, De Lang is awake." Seeing Zhou Su inexplicably, he wakes up as soon as he wakes up. Can he sleep and not wake up? The ancients were all fussy. Little did he know that this was his third day of sleep. Although this guy was showing off his skills in the restaurant, it wasn't just the young master and young lady who went out. When he heard a commotion in the room, the servant quickly entered to stop Zhou Su. Unexpectedly, the one who tripped him stumbled on the door pillar and fell to the ground. Breathing and heartbeat are present, but no matter how you call, you never wake up. Both the imperial physician and the renowned physician have come to see it, and it is said that there is no major problem with the blood qi rushing to the brain. As for why it is not awake, it is unclear. Mrs. Zhou had no choice but to invite Master Zuyo from Huang Laoguan. Just now, at the beginning of spring, she was holding the divine water that Master Zuyo had burned for the talisman. While Mrs. Zhou was speaking to her daughter outside the front door, she heard shouting from the inner courtyard. When Master Zuyo left, he said, "Be quiet and not make a fuss. Who knows this? If you deceive yourself, you won't punish anyone. Madam, girl, woe, big. Woe. Madame Zhou and her daughter Zhou Jun entered the second gate of the inner courtyard with a few maids, and coincidentally collided with the approaching Li Chun. If it weren't for Zhou Jun's obstruction, they would have had to bump into someone and overturn their horse. "You girl, you usually look steady, but today you can't go crazy. What's the name of shouting so loudly?" Zhou Jun pushed Li Chuan away, frowned and scolded in displeasure. Li Chuan waved his hands together, unable to speak and gasped for breath. Finally, he managed to catch his breath and calmly stared at Shui Lingling's big eyes, shouting happily. "Madam, Dalong is awake. Miss, Dalong is awake." "Ah! What are you saying? My son is awake." Madame Zhou took a few steps forward and grabbed Li Chuan's shoulders. It was rare for a noblewoman like her to exert such great strength, causing Li Chuan's shoulders to ache. Seeing Li Chuan nodded heavily, her eyes lit up, and her hands clasped together. "Blessed by Bodhisattva, my son has finally woken up. If our ancestors ascend again, my son will be fine." After finishing speaking, she didn't care about the maid and mother-in-law, but hurriedly went away. Zhou Jun led Li Chuan and the others to follow quickly, and everyone's face showed a happy smile. Since Zhou Su was unconscious, the oppressive atmosphere in the mansion has become increasingly heavy, especially the big shot tomorrow is coming back. Damn it, this wood must be very expensive, right? Cha, is this gold? It's so heavy, what is this thing? Zhou Su was inexplicably affected by the beginning of spring and couldn't lie down anymore. At this moment, he was wearing a middle coat and several pieces of clothing. It wasn't that he didn't dress properly, it was that he didn't know how to dress, and there was no memory of wearing clothes in his original memory. When he was a child, a gentle lady dressed him, and when he grew up, a heroic girl dressed him. When he was in his teens, the Zhou family was helped by a maid because the Empress Dowager had developed emotion. In later generations, is probably also a master who can make headlines by learning to eat on his own. A pure waste. Fortunately, he could walk on his own, and even though there was a charcoal pot in the room, it wasn't too cold. At this moment, Zhou Su wandered around the room, looking at various exquisite and gorgeous decorations that he knew were very valuable at a glance. The purple tremor-wood furniture emitted a faint fragrance, the pear and marble table was visible in the sunlight, and he looked at his unfamiliar face in the gilded copper mirror. I have really traveled through. There was a commotion outside, and Zhou Su put down his bronze mirror. Before leaving the inner room, he saw a woman rushing in from the outer door, wearing a mink velvet jacket and a light-colored fur skirt. She strode into the room, bringing a chill. "My son, are you really good?" "Ha!" Zhou Su was still in a daze. The woman had already taken a few steps to grab him. Her cold hands stimulated Zhou Su, and she saw Zhou Su dressed in a single shirt. She immediately said urgently, "Fool, why don't you lie down in bed when you wake up? Dressed in such a cold weather, are you the only one who is happy because your mother is worried?" Although the tone was scolding, it was more caring, and Zhou Su could feel the deep affection of licking the calf. Being pulled and tucked into the blanket by the woman, Zhou Su realized that there were tears on her face. His nose was uncontrollably sore and his throat was dry, and he let out a foolish cry. "Mother, ah my son, you scared your mother to death." Woo, the last word of "mother" that I haven't heard for several days has made Mrs. Zhou burst into tears. Zhou Su really scared her this time. If Zhou Su didn't have her, how should I explain to the master and ancestors? I have been worried all day, and now it's finally over. "Little brother, mother," a group of people cheered outside the door. Zhou Jun took a few steps to the bedside and saw that Zhou Su was really awake. He breathed a long sigh of relief and called out with joy. Zhou Su looked at the woman who had helped him dress when he was a child in his memory, and reluctantly agreed. "Sister, I really scared my sister to death. Don't make such a fuss in the future, it's really shocking." Zhou Jun's eyes turned red at once, as the siblings and mother and son huddled together. The choking sound of the mother and daughter, as well as the love and affection between the two. Zhou Su had experienced it as an orphan in his past life, and the incense on their bodies carried a warm breeze, only allowing him to immerse himself in family affection. Don't think about anything else, just comfort the two of them. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Xiang Yuan relives enmity and revenge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Xiang Yuan relives enmity and revenge. Under the care of his older sister's mother, Zhou Su was asked for warmth for a long time. Without mentioning his fight, he only ordered the kitchen to make a bowl of calming soup and let him drink it before resting. The medicinal effect came up, and he fell asleep in a daze. The door was gently pushed open, and the maid Lichuan was carrying a basin of hot water to wipe Zhou Su's body. Upon hearing Zhou Xuchang's slow breathing, he gently retreated. "Madam, the Lang has fallen asleep." Li Chun respectfully bowed and replied to Mrs. Zhou. Mrs. Zhou and Zhou Jun were selecting silk fabrics and some headpieces. A few days ago, although Mrs. Zhou knew that Zhou Su had caused trouble first, she even started beating someone. But he remained unconscious, and Mrs. Zhou's heart gradually began to feel uneasy. It's common for children to fight. If you really don't succeed, you haven't talked to the Jia and Shui families. Now that Zhou Su has woken up, she understands the reason and wants to go. The Zhou family comes from a small family background, and although they have become prosperous now, they are not that unreasonable. This is to go and see how the Shui family's elder brother has been treated. Her own son knows that some of his bravery may be due to being beaten lightly since childhood. As for the Jia family, they will have to wait for Zhou Su's father to come back. The orphan and widowed mother of the Shui family will be fine, and even the Jia family, who is a woman, is not easy to come to. Moreover, Jia's family is a duke of two kingdoms, which is somewhat different from the Shui family. She went to a woman's family, which made people think she was looked down upon. Hey, when will this tiger idiot grow up? Hu Qi is the nickname of Zhou Su, because he is a bit of a tiger-headed tiger brain and often impulsively causes trouble. He got such a nickname. Zhou Jun looked at these silk brocades, which are all bright and of good color. She couldn't bear to part with several horses, but she was willing to part with them for the sake of her younger brother. It's actually nothing, but after drinking later, Zhou Xuanwei met Xue Pan from the Xue family with a maid and several sisters from the Jia family in the tavern. For many years, there were wars in the previous dynasty, and many rules and etiquette were not followed. Women in the brothels of the common people often went out to play, but they often wore curtains to cover their faces. Only the maidservants followed the master and inevitably showed their faces. He somehow fell in love with Xue Pan's maid Xiang at a glance, and went up to buy it at a high price. Xue Pan naturally refused, and the two of them said a few words to each other and reported their family. On one hand, the old aristocratic family is accustomed to being arrogant and domineering with relatives and connections, while on the other hand, the powerful general's mansion has imperial relatives who rely on them without mercy, so they are not on the same path. They immediately confront each other. One cursed the mud legs splashing on the military households, and the other cursed the sorghum as a worm. Each article has its own unique strengths and weaknesses, so one must use martial arts to determine victory or defeat. Zhou Su was originally a general who was not fond of literature and martial arts from a young age. It is not a problem to say that he would defeat Xue Pan, such a talented young man. Although he drank a lot of alcohol that day and was very skilled, Xue Pan and others who fought the same were rolling on the ground, and even Jia Baoyu, who was trying to persuade him, was hit. The person who was beaten was fine, and the person who hit fell unconscious on the ground. The maids and servants of the three families were all frightened. Xue Pan endured the pain and ran away with Jia Baoyu, while Zhou Su was carried back home by his own servant and woke up after 3 days. Within Rongguo Prefecture. Oh my God! This foolish person who broke down his household has beaten my son like a fool. Bao Chai, please write to your uncle with me. If you don't believe that his family comes from a muddy background, can you surpass the Wang family? This is the pear fragrance courtyard of Rongguo Prefecture. After the Xue family entered the capital, they settled here. Originally, the Xue family had a mansion in the capital. Zheng sent someone up to tell Mrs. Wang that her aunt has already passed the spring and autumn period, and her nephew knows nothing about the world. If he lives outside, he may have some life to attend to. There is a room of about 10 rooms in the pear fragrance courtyard in the northeast corner of Rongguo, and it is better for them to live in it when they have nothing to do. Mrs. Xue also felt that there was some truth after listening to it. First of all, there was a Daojiamen door in this courtyard, opposite Mrs. Wang's courtyard. Sisters was very close to her. Secondly, I also thought that Xue Pan couldn't control her, maybe she could be placed in the yard for the political master to discipline her. Who would have thought that in just a few days, Xue Pan had gone out upright and been carried back horizontally? It was only after asking that he found out that he had been beaten by the foolish son of General Zhou Suji. The mother howled, while the younger brother screamed in pain, causing Xue Baochai to furrow her brows. She had already asked several companions about the matter, but it can be said that the Zhou family was at fault first, and her brother also had some mistakes. Mother, please keep your voice down, Mom scolded harshly, so Xue Baochai quickly looked outside and only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw no one. Regardless of the previous family background of the Zhou family, there is an Empress Dowager in the palace today. The Wang family really cannot handle General Xuanwei's Zhou family. At most, they can report to your majesty to reprimand General Xuanwei for not being strict with his children. Mother, it's easy to inform my uncle, but my brother only has a skin injury now. But General Xuanwei's son said he's unconscious. Who's at fault this time? Although Xue Baochai had comments about hiding foolishness and being clumsy outside, what she had to say in front of her family was that she had to say it. However, she was extremely clever not to refute her mother's words to prevent her from getting even angrier. She only asked how to write a letter to discuss a mistake. Xue Pan immediately started groaning upon hearing this. Sister, why did I ever have a skin injury? I was in excruciating pain. The coma caused by the balloon didn't concern me. My brother only hit him a few times without exerting any force, maybe he was pretending to be deceiving our family. Xue's mother was not very angry when she heard Xue Pan's words. She wanted to reach out and hit him, but couldn't bear it. She lifted her hand and pressed and cursed on his chubby face, saying, "How did I give birth to your karma? Besides causing trouble, have you ever done something serious? Oh, Mom, you've wronged your son this time. Where did I go to provoke that fool? Baoyu and other sisters invited me as the host before I went. It was he who saw me bringing Xiangling and was going to forcibly buy it. How could my son agree?" Sigh, I spoke a little louder, and when I reached the painful spot, Xue Pan grinned and breathed in. How could I not have been in pain all night? The pain is so severe today. Am I going to die? This silly guy is worried in his heart. He knows that people who have been inactive for a long time will not feel pain the next day after intense exercise. Last night, although Zhou Su got drunk and hit hard a few times, he didn't have much strength, but it was Xue Pan's own excessive movements that injured several places. It's Xiangling again. As soon as Mrs. Xue spoke, the little maid standing by trembled all over. She had already thought of Mrs. Xue calling the boy in and pulling her out to fight. Hi, what's up to her? It's not that stupid guy who drank too much urine and thought he was who he was. My mother asked me not to bother my uncle, and he even beat up his precious brother. He only asked Rongguo to participate in that general's book tomorrow morning and let him have no way out. Xue Pan thought for a while but couldn't figure out how to say that idiom. Xue Baochai helped her forehead. Brother, that's a case of teaching children without proper methods, not without proper methods. You should read more books at home and avoid going to those fireworks and willow alleys. Ah, yes, it's just that I have no way to teach my son. My sister is right. Xue Pan only praised Xue Baochai for a moment, and if he were to be asked to study later, it would be as if the breeze had passed his ears. He eagerly looked at his mother. Xue's mother couldn't make up her mind and looked at Xue Baochai beside her. Mother and brother, this matter is not a big deal to say, and it's common for people to lose their composure after drinking. Besides, those from that family are heard to be even worse than this one. Mom is just heartbroken, so it's easy to vent her anger. Xue Baochai's ideas have always been upright, and when Xue's mother encounters difficulties, she often asks her to come up with an idea. When she hears Xue Baochai say something, it's easy to get angry and ask questions. So, Baochai, how did you say that to your brother? When my older brother is cured in 2 days, I think the Zhou family will also be better. Mr. Zhen from the East Mansion, Mr. Su from the West Mansion, and General Xuanwei are both military officials. We will prepare a host and call General Xuanwei's house to have his brothers come and discuss with Brother Baoyu to clarify the right and wrong. However, there has not been any movement on my aunt's side yet. You have become embroiled in a stalemate, which seems to be my mother's favoritism and indulgence in causing trouble and hiring people. Today, I accidentally suffered a loss, and my mother is stirring up trouble and using the power of relatives to suppress others is not acceptable. After hearing Xue Baochai finish speaking, Xue's mother turned the conversation and said, My son, as you might have thought, my mother was confused for a moment, but your younger brother was not beaten for nothing at that time. According to Xue's mother's meaning, it's best to fight back. Although Xue Pan is a promiscuous person, he is extremely filial to his mother. Xue's mother said that he never touched a finger, but he was beaten hard in this capital. Baochai smiled and said, It's a good thing to do it. He's not afraid of his mother, and he doesn't listen to advice. Day by day, it's like a day. After suffering 2 losses, he's just lying down. Xue Pan was very unhappy when she heard that her sister was actually facing outsiders. Sister, why are you turning your arm out before you even look at someone? If you were to confront the person you fell in love with that day, wouldn't you still have to help him beat his brother? Brother. Mother, look at him. Xue Baochai's face turned red with anger when she heard these words about her younger sister. Xue's mother was also speechless, picking up a handkerchief and smashing it on Xue Pan's face. She couldn't help but say, "Close your stinky mouth. You really missed the fight." The three of them were talking when a maid outside suddenly came to report. "Madam, Miss De Lang, someone has come outside the door and said that it was Lady Zhou from General Xuanwei's mansion who came to visit with the girl." General Xuanwei, Mrs. Zhou. The mother and daughter looked at each other. Isn't this the family that hit Xue Pan? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Gate of Failure, Mo Gaopan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Gate of Failure, Mo Gaopan Zhuqiang Deep Courtyard, Elegant Pavilion. At the entrance of the Pear Fragrance Courtyard, Lady Zhou and Zhou Jun got off the carriage, and two maids, Xiaoman and Bailu, served from left to right. The servants carried silk cloth and waited by the side. "Mother, this Jia family is indeed wealthy, but this other courtyard has surpassed our family. Zhou Jun is also visiting Rongning 2nd Street for the first time, and the grandeur of this Xuanwei Gong Gate is unmatched by anyone else. These two government gates alone occupy a few streets, and I'm afraid there aren't many stronger ones in this capital than them. The ancestors of the Jia family have been descendants of dragons and have accumulated several generations, which is naturally not comparable to our family. This Xue family is also a member of the Zhenying family, so don't let your son lose his courtesy later." Daughter saves. The mother and daughter were talking, and the side door of the Pear Fragrance Courtyard opened. A maid wearing a water-red silk jacket, a blue satin vest, and a white crepe silk scarf tied around her waist leaned out to take a look. It was Xue Baochai's personal maid, Huang Jinying, who was called Yinger. Yinger saw Mrs. Zhou and her daughter, twisted her head from the door, and slightly bent down to ask, "But General Xuanwei's wife?" "Yes, is Mrs. Xue convenient?" "My girl's wife has called a maid to welcome Madam in. They are waiting in the hall." "Madam, please come with me." The maid Yinger heard that the person who had injured her family's eldest son had arrived, and she didn't have a good expression. However, seeing Lady Zhou's grace and elegance, as well as her courteous demeanor, she didn't dare to casually and politely introduce her mother and daughter into the courtyard. The mother and daughter entered the Pear Fragrance Courtyard, where they saw a small and elegant layout, with about 10 rooms and a complete front and back living room. At the entrance, there is a street, and the Xue Pan family enters and exits through this gate. There is a corner gate in the southwest, which leads to a narrow path. The small pavilion is surrounded by green flowers and plants, and the early winter is a quiet place to live. Mrs. Zhou thought to herself that living in such a quiet place would make it easy for Xue Fu's family to deal with Yiren. Yinger led them through the front yard and turned to the back hall. Mrs. Zhou only brought 2 maids and let the servants wait in front. From a distance, there were 2 people standing at the foot of a staircase. A noble lady with emerald green pearl hairpins, a golden floral patterned satin cloak with a navy blue background, an ivory cross neck jacket, and a light blue long skirt. She held a tang pazi in her hand, exuding a noble and elegant demeanor. The girl was wearing a pitch black and shiny bun on her head, a honey-colored cotton jacket, a rose-purple gold and silver mouse shoulder-length jacket, and a scallion yellow silk cotton skirt. It was neither new nor old, and Lady Zhou thought it was Lady Xue's maid. Getting closer, Fong can see clearly what kind of good talent it is. Seeing her plump appearance, graceful demeanor, lips not pointed but red, eyebrows not painted but green, face like a silver bowl, eyes like apricots, standing there holding a beautiful lady from a wealthy family that is likable. "Hee, Mrs. Xue came uninvited and bothered me." Zhou's mother, with a smile on her face, approached to greet Mrs. Xue and then kept looking at the woman next to her. Although Mrs. Xue knew that it was the son of the woman in front of her who had injured Xue Pan, she had to greet him with a smile out of etiquette. What's Mrs. Xuanwei bothering you about? I should have gone to find her and talked to her a long time ago." It's just that our family has just arrived in the capital and we don't have anyone to live in. As a woman, it's not easy for me to walk around. No wonder, Xue's mother spoke with a smile as she looked at Lady Zhou in front of her, who was of the same age as her, dressed in plain and not extravagant attire, with only a golden hairpin on her head. It didn't seem like she was coming to find fault. When she first heard the news that General Xuanwei's family had arrived, she thought something had happened to her little boy. She was really shocked when he came to seek revenge. But Menzi also said that she came with courtesy. Looking at Mrs. Zhou's attire, she finally calmed down. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to secure another lawsuit, which is not like Jinling. This is the little girl Zhou Jun. Juner hasn't seen Mrs. Xue yet. Zhou Jun gave a plump bow, and Mrs. Xue saw that the daughter of the Zhou family was not only beautiful, but also had a heroic spirit that was not like the usual delicate temperament of a daughter's family. After bowing, one should be elegant and free from any formality. Isn't this Mrs. Xue from the Xue family? I wonder if it's her sister or sister. Zhou Jun approached and looked at Xue Baochai, who was such a prominent figure. Xue Baochai pursed her lips and smiled, without the need for Xue's mother to give her a greeting. Xue Baochai has met Lady Xuanwei. Then he returned to Zhou Jun's words and said, I haven't reached the age of Ji yet, so I should be younger than Sister Jun. When a woman reaches the age of 15, she reaches the hairpin, which is a hairpin used to tie her hair. Women who reach the age of 15 should tie their hair up and wear the hairpin, which is known as the hairpin ceremony, or commonly known as the upper head or upper head ceremony. Although Zhou Jun has not yet reached her hairpin, it is because she has not yet made a promise to marry someone. She calculated in her heart that she should be more than 1 year older than Xue Baochai. I didn't expect her to be so generous before she turned 15, and I don't know if she promised her. After a brief exchange of greetings among the four, Xue Baochai spoke up and said, Madam, Sister Zhou is not the place to talk either. Please sit down in the inner hall and talk. Yes, ma'am, please. Mother Xue nodded her head and said yes. She led the two women into the flower hall and sat down. She also arranged for the servant girls to serve tea and dim sum. Mrs. Xue did not know how to ask, but secretly speculated about the purpose of the Zhou family. It was Zhou Jun and Xue Baochai who chatted on the side. In the end, Zhou's mother saw that the atmosphere was a bit stiff, so she opened her mouth first. She placed her hands on her legs and leaned slightly to say to Mrs. Xue. Today was abrupt. I should have come earlier, but unfortunately, my family's karma is not always awake. Even after hiring a doctor, I can't see the reason. These days, I really haven't had the heart to think about anything else. Zhou's mother stood up and apologized 10 times, it was my lack of discipline that led to that idiot injuring your young master. As a mother, I will compensate him to his wife for his wrongdoing. Please forgive me. Madame Xue was taken aback for a moment. She saw that Lady Zhou was indeed about to bow down and bow down. How could this be done? She was also a lady ordered by the court, and if she received this gift, she was afraid that the censor would come knocking on her door. She quickly summoned Xue Baochai. Madame Zhou, what did you say? You've put sorghum on my house like this, Madame Xuanwei, this is absolutely unacceptable. Xue Baochai took a few steps forward to hold on to Zhou, who followed Xue Baochai. She also knew that bowing to Xue's mother was not appropriate, it was just a show of determination as a general. She was helped by Xue Baochai and patted her jade hand, sighing, Hey madam, you didn't receive this gift. It was a serious injury from the noble young master. Would you not forgive me? Now Mrs. Xue had no idea. If she received her gift, it would be even more troublesome. If she didn't, it would appear that her family was in big hands. Everyone else had personally come knocking on the door, so there was nothing to worry about. However, she always felt uneasy in her heart. She looked up at Xue Baochai, who turned to the west and was taken aback. Yes. It's easy to forgive the Zhou family on our own side, but that kid not only hit Xuepan, but also gave her sister's baby a bump. Now she set aside the matter and forgave the Zhou family. What will they say then? They will also say that they are not with the Jia family and their thoughts will not change. They only say, "Madam, it's too serious. Where did this ceremony come from? My family's skin is rough and my flesh is thick. I've always been used to it and can't handle it properly. It will be over in a few days." Then she turned to ask. "I just have a nephew named Baoyu, who I heard was also injured by his father. He has been raised as a daughter since childhood and has never been involved in any physical violence. I don't know what's going on." After hearing these words, Zhou's mother felt like a mirror in her heart. Mrs. Xue asked if she had ever been forgiven by the Jia family. If the Jia family did not understand, she had nothing to say on her side. Well, the Jia family has a high family background. My family is not familiar with the Guogong mansion, so it's not easy for me to visit. I'll just wait for my master to return before apologizing to the Guogong mansion. It may take a few more days. After Zhou's mother finished speaking, Mrs. Xue's face didn't look good anymore. It's not easy for him to visit his family's mansion, so can I just send him away? He said lightly, since that's the case, why not wait for General Xuanwei to return and let the three families work together as hosts? Just speak up and avoid Madam rushing around. At this point, there is nothing more to say. The gift was never received by the Xue family, and Zhou Jun, the mother of Zhou, drove back. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. General Xuanwei. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 General Xuanwei. Mother, why is the Xue family like this? We have prepared a generous gift to come to our door. If it doesn't start well, why don't we come back in a few days? Zhou Jun was inside the carriage, and she couldn't figure it out. Today, she came specifically to apologize to the Xue family. She still had a conversation with Xue Baochai, so she hurriedly left without a few words. Zhou's mother saw her daughter frown and let out a sigh. Silly girl, Jia Wang Xue, the four families have been integrated since the founding of the country, and now the Jia family is the leader. Mrs. Wang is not only Xue's sister, but also the second wife of Rongguo mansion. Her niece is also Rongguo's daughter. In law, so it doesn't matter over here. But it doesn't matter what precious jade it is. I heard from the servant with me that it was just a touch. Zhou Jun couldn't figure out the reason behind it. Zhou's mother understood that there was probably only the Jia family in the capital who could dote on children better than them. Zhou Su's father had served in the military since he was young, so his mother and sister naturally doted on him. But Zhou Su is mischievous and often fights and bumps with children, which is a common occurrence. If it weren't for the Jia and Xue families this time, Zhou Su would have been unconscious for a few more days, so it shouldn't be a big deal. You don't know, Jia Baoyu from the Jia family is not only born well and talented, but also extraordinary. When he was born, he was different from others. From birth, he had a piece of fetal jade in his mouth, which was born with jade in his mouth. Not only did his mother, Lady Wang, dote on him, but even Lady Jia, the wife of Rongguo, dote on him very much. He is a child of an ordinary family. Zhou's mother was a bit emotional. According to Mrs. Xue's suggestion, the Jia family may not be able to let go of this matter so easily. Although they are not afraid of what the Jia family will do, it is not worth arguing with them because of such a trivial matter. As I turned a few streets and was about to reach the Zhou mansion, I hurriedly ran into the mansion for an hour and looked up to see the distant frame. Isn't it the lady's car? He said something to the door and ran towards the carriage. Zhou Jun wanted to say something else when he suddenly heard someone shouting outside the car, and the car came to a stop with a creak. Bailu, Xiaoxue, let's see who it is. What's wrong with living on the frame? Yes, madam. The maid lifted a corner and poked her head out to see that it was a household servant in the mansion. She asked, Zhang San, what are you doing here? Do you know if it's Lady and Miss returning to the mansion? It turns out to be Miss Xiaoxue. I have something to report to Madam and Miss. The person wiped the sweat off his forehead, took a few steps closer, increased his volume, and spoke back to the car. Madam, Miss, the general has already arrived outside the city. I estimate that he has already entered the capital by now. Ah, why did Dad come back so soon? Isn't it specifically for my younger brother? Zhou Jun listened carefully and exclaimed in surprise. Her father returned from his post in Jiangnan, at least in 10 or 8 days. Why did he come back in 3 or 5 days? Madame Zhou is not surprised. The Qian followed the ancient system of the New Year's Day court, and this year the old master may have set off early for something, so he wouldn't have returned early just for Zhou Su's sake. As much as you think, since your father has returned, let's go meet him and go back to the mansion together. Mrs. Zhou nodded at Zhou Jun's forehead and instructed the car to turn around and head towards the Imperial Street. At this moment, Zhou Su also slept for a whole day, his soul possessed flesh and he felt better than ever before. He was chatting with the maid Lichuan. How old are you? How did De Lang ask about this? I should be 15 this year, right? I can't remember the beginning of spring very clearly, and when I entered the mansion, I just remembered the events. It has been 7 or 8 years since then. 15. It's also a punishment, at most 2.5 years. Zhou Su held the maid's hand, the back of his hand smooth and soft, but his palm had a little cocoon, indicating that he often worked. It's strange that Zhou Su touched Li Chun's hands. In the past, De Lang didn't like to touch people close to him. What's wrong with him now? Thinking of the people in the room that the old lady talked about, De Lang is enlightened. The more he thought about it, the redder his face became. Seeing the shy expression of the maid waiting to be released, Zhou Su's fingers moved greatly, and he felt in his heart that the corrupt feudal life was just good. Putting such a beautiful little girl in the past, can she touch her without making a list? Just as he was about to flirt with her again, a little maid suddenly came in. Zhou Su didn't quite remember her name, Xiaohong or Xiaolv. Ouch, the little girl didn't look at the road either. She turned her head and bumped into the pearl curtain door. She crouched on the ground, holding the portrait of a little dog and sobbing, while Zhou Su chuckled. What's Hong doing in a panic? I wonder if Dalong just woke up. As the eldest sister in this courtyard, Li Chuan frowned and looked at Chen Hong recklessly. It's okay to be mischievous outside. How could she bring her inside? Wu Dalong, Sister Li Chuan, the door just said that the master has returned. Ah. Zhou Shuban was still laughing when he heard these words, and his body instinctively reacted with surprise. The memories of his original body immediately surfaced from the depths. A solemn and dignified middle-aged man with stern eyes and a calm demeanor. In his memory, he was either asked to hold up his chair for a long time or to write big characters in the study with a stick. But the original body was not made of this material, and the thought of this buttocks made him feel a faint pain. He said he was always thinking about something in his heart, thinking it was a sequela of time travel. Emotions are waiting for him here. Before the Zhou family got up, they were just a small military officer under Duke Xingua. It wasn't until Zhou's aunt and grandmother became the Empress Dowager that they gradually rose up. Having reached the third rank and the highest level of propriety, Zhou Su had just been born, and his father, in response to the royal grace, dared not slack off for a moment. There are up to 200 days in a year when he is away, but these few months at home are the most difficult for his original self. Thinking about what his original self has caused this time, Zhou Su shivers. Li Chuan, come on, get my book. Dalong, you're just feeling better now. Don't bother reading any books, let's take a good rest. When Li Chuan heard that it was the old master returning, he was not surprised that it was around this time every year. There was nothing strange about it. Oh, bring it to you. Who can quickly dress me up with this? Zhou Su couldn't help but lift the quilt and pretended to get up, pointing to the clothes on the shelf and asking the little maid to help him dress. "Hey, slow down, De Lang, slow down, don't dare to catch a cold. I'll go get a book. Chunhong and De Lang are dressed, and I'll go to the study to get a book." "Got it, Sister Li Chuan." After a flurry, Zhou Su put on his clothes, and Li Chun also brought a book. He lit up the wick and sat on the bookshelf in the outer room. A cup of hot tea was served with a charcoal stove and red sleeves by my side. I don't know if I thought that the ambitious kid from that family was burning the midnight oil to study. "Take a look at the book in your hand, the historical records. Good guy, this little girl Li Chun is really good at choosing, he's just what he wants." Switching between traditional Chinese automatic modes, Zhou Su struggled to read it, but it turned out to be quite interesting. The world of emotions has gone wrong since Qin, and I don't know if it was the senior who didn't want to learn English who got dressed in the wrong place and missed the first emperor, but instead elevated Prince Fusu to the throne. Starting the 600-year foundation of the Qin dynasty, it was inevitable that history would undergo cycles and dynasties would change. Zhou Su was mesmerized as he watched it. Bang! The door was kicked open, which frightened 3 people inside the room. Zhou Su turned around to look. Wearing a helmet piercing through his armor, holding a whip, his gaze scanned the room sharply, and he turned his head to face Zhou Su. General Xuanwei, the military governor of Jiangnan Road. Zhou Suyuan. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Prosperity is bound to decline, while luxury is in danger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Prosperity is bound to decline, while luxury is in danger. Inside the house. The cold wind outside poured in from behind Zhou Suyuan, causing the oil lamp to flash. "Master, master," at the beginning of spring, Chunhong bowed to greet Zhou Suyuan, while Zhou Su thought he had already done a good job of mental construction, not just meeting a cheap father according to my original memory, I should be able to handle this set of superficial skills. But why are you shaking your hands? I can't control it. Why did I stand up on my own? I didn't want to stand up. What made Zhou Su even more speechless was that his leg moved uncontrollably and hid behind the 2 maids, shouting and shouting like a character in his original memory. Although he has been doing good and bad things for a long time, he can still be considered a man. How come when he sees his father, his muscular memory is so strong? You can't do this. Taking a sneak glance, I did see a slight twitch on Zhou Suyuan's face. I guess seeing Zhou Su like this might be a sigh of admiration for his tiger father's son. Zhou Su suddenly pushed aside 2 maids and took a few steps forward. Although he was a bit stiff, he bowed with a firm bow. Breath out. Son, I have met my father. Today, he is feeling unwell and unable to personally welcome him into the mansion. I wonder if my father's health is good after being away for many years. Although his body was stiff, his tone remained neither humble nor overbearing, unlike before. When he asked a question, he stuttered and couldn't utter a whole sentence for a long time. Zhou Suyuan's eyes flashed with a strange color, and his 4 pairs of eyes looked at each other behind him. Has my son changed his nature? Is Adi not afraid of his father anymore? Zhou Su didn't hear a response and looked up to see Zhou Suyuan looking at him with a complex expression in his eyes. Not seen in a year, my son is strong again, not inferior to his father, and even more beautiful. Just now, he lamented that his temperament was not like that of a man. Now, it seems like he was really too strict in the past. And Zhou Su also looked at this cheap father, with a resolute and frosty face, eyes shining like a torch, beautiful beards and long beards, and a Chinese-style face with sharp bones. He didn't look very sturdy, but he stood there like a rock mountain. Unlike his imagined image of an ancient general with a large arms and a round waist, it gave Zhou Su a sense of security and a sense of oppression. General Xuanwei walked with a resounding pace, and the sound of Jia Yi moved. Zhou Su also followed him and turned his body. His nose could smell a smell of iron and blood. It seems that this cheap father is not a vegetarian. Until Zhou's mother and Zhou Jun entered the room, their instinctive nervousness disappeared without a trace, leaving Zhou Xuquan silent. This guy. Zhou's mother came over and looked at Zhou Su with a happy expression in her eyes. With only one glance, she walked up to him and instructed the maid to prepare regular hot water. Because Zhou Suyuan didn't even have time to unload his armor, he came to see his son. This made Zhou's mother happy in her heart. Although the master was strict, he still felt sorry for Zhou Su. She knew that if it was just a fight, the master wouldn't be so eager. She must have heard that her son had been unconscious for a few days before rushing to take a look. She recited Amitabha Buddha 10,000 times in her heart. Fortunately nothing happened. Zhou Jun blinked at him, as if saying, if my younger brother had this kind of masculinity for a long time, he wouldn't have been afraid of his father for more than a decade. Zhou's mother and sister, who were waiting, removed Zhou Suyuan's armor and wore a black polka-patterned deep robe, covered in a gray fox fur, and a black square hat. In the blink of an eye, a general with a killing spirit sat there like a wealthy man. Zhou Su watched as the maids carried away the armor piece by piece and tried to touch it. Suddenly, a thick voice rang in his ears. The first word sounded hard, but the second and third words softened a lot. Look. What book are you reading? Zhou Su was stunned for a moment. Didn't you just go over and ask me, to entertain your young master? Of course, this was his imagination. Upon hearing Zhou Suyuan's question, Zhou Su walked up to him and respectfully replied. Go back to my father and read the historical records. Zhou Suyuan may not know what he is looking at, but he is also aware of the child's habitual use of this method, and usually does not reveal it. But seeing him different this time, I thought he had indeed made progress, so I asked. Is there any income? Zhou Su's eyes twirled, wondering why he still couldn't pass the exam. I've already said that, he cleared his throat and said with a serious expression. Lord Hui, I don't quite understand the other scriptures, but I have a slight understanding of this historical record. Zhou's mother, Zhou Jun, is puzzled. You go out all day to play around, and even if the book is covered in dust, you won't be able to read it. Why are you still talking big? Zhou Suyuan looked at Zhou Su so confident that he didn't seem to be cheating, so he showed interest and pointed to him standing aside. Oh. Then sit down and talk to you waifu. The master travels day and night. It's better to arrange for food and rest early if you're hungry. How about tomorrow's tiger idiot's homework? It can be seen that Zhou Su is favored by his mother. Zhou Su has hit the tip of his gun and needs to block his way. Let's wait until tomorrow to give him some preparation time. It's common to suppress bandits day and night in the mountains and rivers. This is not a big deal. Madam, please arrange some pastries for me to eat. Tiger idiot, please continue. Zhou Suyuan waved his hand, and Mrs. Zhou gave Zhou Su a kind look, leading Zhou Jun down to arrange for food. Cough, a few simple words from the child, please ask the father for guidance. Zhou Su remained calm at all. Seeing Zhou Suyuan nodding slightly, he pointed to the copper mirror beside him and said. And I thought that this history book was like a mirror, using copper as a mirror to correct clothes and crowns, people as a mirror to distinguish gains and losses, and history as a mirror to determine rise and fall. After Zhou Su finished speaking, General Xuanwei's eyes narrowed. Although he was a warrior, he later gained the trust of the emperor and was repeatedly promoted to high positions, serving as a minister in the same hall as numerous powerful officials. Feeling deeply crude, I have read many poems and scriptures, consulted with others, but I have never heard such wonderful words. Bang! He startled Zhou Su with a tap on the table, wondering if someone had said this before. No, I just saw that there weren't any of those people, right? Using copper as a mirror can correct one's attire, people as a mirror can discern gains and losses, and history as a mirror can reveal rise and fall. Good, good, good. Zhou Su's eyes lit up for 3 good exits in a row, and then he stared at Zhou Su with a burning gaze, asking, "Where did you learn this?" When I first met my father, what? What happened? Zhou Su stuttered and answered, unsure if it was because he had worn it or how he had dripped it. The old man had such a big reaction. Really? Just now, when I saw my father shining in the mirror, wearing a helmet and armor, and displaying extraordinary bravery, my child was so unbearable that he dared not deceive his father. Zhou Su flattered a little and breathed a sigh of relief. No one had ever said anything about his father's behavior. Huh, you're so naive. Can you tell me what you've learned? Zhou Suyuan couldn't help but smile when he saw Zhou Su's affirmation, which was even more joyful than his complete efforts in suppressing bandits this time, and even more joyful than the emperor's commendation. Zhou Su spread out his hand and said, "My child has only taken a rough look, but he understands the principle that prosperity is bound to decline, and that luxury brings danger to oneself." Zhou Suyuan nodded. At a young age, he could understand these things much better than him. Suddenly, he saw Zhou Su's eyes dodge, and he immediately understood. Angry and funny, pointing at Zhou Su and cursing, "You scoundrel, knowing that the family is prosperous and expensive, you still go to provoke them." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. A Spring of Gold and Jade in the Courtyard. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. A Spring of Gold and Jade in the Courtyard. Rongguo Prefecture. At night, the lights inside the Gaopan mansion were brightly lit. Looking down at the capital from a high place, except for the imperial palace, this family could not compare to the Ningguo mansion on the same street. The rest of the streets and alleys may have bright and dark lights, but they are just stars dotted with the bright moon in the sky. All the doors of each courtyard have been locked, but the Pear Fragrance courtyard, which is connected to the inner courtyard, can be directly accessed. Since Jia Baoyu was accidentally injured by Zhou Su that day, his sisters have come to visit him for several days in succession, and they are always waiting on him. Later, Aunt Xue asked Xue Baochai to come and see Baoyu. She could only respond to Xue's mother's words and now arrived at Jia Baoyu's yard. Originally, Miss Bao has arrived. Shiren opened the door and saw Xue Baochai and the maid Yinger. He quickly signaled to the room that he was about to leave. Xue Baochai stopped and asked, "Where are you going so late?" "Miss, I don't know. The second master will be mischievous and say he wants to eat lotus leaf soup, otherwise the wound won't stop hurting." Shiren didn't hesitate to say a word before leaving the yard with a lamp on. His mouth was shattered, and it sounded like he was cursing the person who had injured Baoyu from a distance. Xue Baochai entered the room by herself, and all the maids on duty were there, including Qingwen, Qiuwen, Shiwe, and others. When Xue Baochai came in, she only called the girl. If Jia Baoyu heard Xue Baochai come on a regular basis, she would definitely get up, but today it is very quiet. "How's Baoyu doing? He hasn't used the medicine in the palace, why hasn't he improved?" "Miss, I have also used the medicine. It's all top-quality wound medicine, but the second master just cried out in pain. The lady has wiped away her tears a few times, and I don't know which family is blind and can't see such a precious person. Let's be worried. If I were to bump into that person, I would definitely spit at him. His face is blossoming." Qingwen was the most unjust, only hating herself for not being on duty that day. The room was full of glutinous rice, otherwise she would have sacrificed her life by Baoyu's side, and could not have let Baoyu be injured. Xue Baochai glanced at Qingwen and thought to herself that Xue Pan's impure temperament had suffered a loss. "If you go, you may not be angry and have someone break the flowers." She took off her cloak and handed it to the maid, walking towards the inner room. The room was filled with a concentrated and still fragrance, and Xue Baochai's footsteps were light. She saw a person lying on the side of the bed in the inner room. She said that Jia Baoyu was asleep, but when she thought about it, she even said that he wanted to eat lotus leaf soup just now. Isn't this guy playing tricks? Jia Baoyu lay in bed listening to the footsteps approaching, but did not smell the smell of powder. She knew that Xue Baochai had come in because she was always simple and did not love flower powder or luxurious makeup. When others come to see him, he likes it, but Xue Baochai knows how to observe details and be careful, so he is afraid that letting her see his true colors will not be beautiful. Originally, in order to avoid going to school, this guy happened to be beaten by Zhou Su this time, with a good reason on his face that he couldn't go to school, and his father's domestic affairs couldn't say anything. In addition, the people in the courtyard were even more attentive, which made him even less prepared. When Mrs. Jia and Mrs. Wang asked, they only said it was still painful. What should I say when Xue Baochai comes? Brother Bao, Brother Bao. Xue Baochai watched as his eyelids twitched, a bit amused. What kind of trick was this pretending to be? She reached out and pushed Jia Baoyu's shoulder, who couldn't turn her head around in a daze. Then, her eyes widened with joy and she said. Is that Sister Bao? Just now, I was a bit tired of thinking about taking a nap to relieve the pain. In my dream, I heard Sister's voice. When I turned around, I saw if it was Sister Bao who had come, but it was really fate in my dream. Jia Baoyu was about to get up when she saw him wearing a single robe. Xue Baochai called on the maid to hold a soft couch and place it behind Baoyu, leaning him against the head of the bed. I didn't look at you in my dream, and you don't have to get up. I just came to sit and talk. Are you feeling better now? The maid brought Jinduaner, and Xue Baochai sat down along the head of the bed in her dress. She could see clearly under the shadow of the lamp. Jia Baoyu had a rosy complexion and lively eyes, except for a bruise the size of an egg under the eyelid in front of her left ear, which was slightly yellow with a green shadow. It is clear that it is almost ready, which also shows that Jia's medicine is much better than Xue Pan's. It was supposed to hurt, but when I saw Sister Bao coming, it didn't hurt much anymore. I thought to myself, Sister, come and see me more, it's better than any medicine. Jia Baoyu covered the wound with his hand and touched it, his eyes flickering as he spoke pleasantries. Seeing Xue Baochai's smile, he felt uneasy in his heart. Pushi, it seems that you are really doing well. Even if you are not doing well, I won't delay you from talking. Why bother deceiving your aunt and old lady? I heard the maid say she is very worried and has shed tears a few times. Upon hearing these words, Xue Baochai understood and couldn't understand why he was deceiving Mrs. Wang and the others. Jia Baoyu knew that he couldn't deceive this clever person, so he reached out to grab Xue Baochai's hand and begged for mercy. Good sister, please keep your voice down. I was also forced by adults to study too hard, and only then did I come up with this solution. Xue Baochai took her hand away and asked him to catch her empty-handed. She just chuckled a few times and advised Jia Baoyu, Uncle let you go to school, it's also for your growth. The Jia family always needs someone to support them, isn't it? Sister, why do you ask me to start learning about that beetle? I read for them, Jia Baoyu detests the pursuit of fame and profit in his career and economy, but his nature is to love reading. However, every time he studies, people often mention these things in his ear, as if reading is for the sake of becoming an official and wealthy, shining on his family. Now that he hears these things, he doesn't like them very much. If what he thinks is not miscalculated, it is also incorrect. Just because he was born into a wealthy family like the Jia family, if he were from another family, there would be no place for him to say this. Just halfway through, there were maids outside calling out names. Second Master, Miss Lin is also here, the door curtain swayed, and the beautiful shadow was ethereal, like a fairy from outside the world. Slowly approaching, a corner of the pearl curtain was lifted, and a pair of gold digging cloud red fragrant sheepskin boots leaked out halfway. Moving like a weak willow and supporting the wind, she took a step inside and paused. When she saw Xue Baochai inside, she blinked. She took off a crane cloak wrapped in a large red feather veil and white fox skin, revealing a blue, gold, and green double ring 4-in-1 wishful belt. Due to her weak physique, she wore thicker clothes than others, and only dared to take off her cloak when she entered the inner room, feeling hot. The maid came up and hung it on the shelf. Lin Daiyu glanced at the two of them, half smiling. When Jia Baoyu saw her, her seventh degree of joy had already become very happy. She set the edge of the bed and asked, "Sister, why did my son come so late?" I said, "What's missing today?" After thinking about it, it turns out that my sister didn't come to me. I feel completely at ease when she came. Humph, if I had known she would have come, I wouldn't have come. Jia Baoyu didn't understand the meaning behind these words and looked at Lin Daiyu with a bewildered expression. Shui Baochai chuckled and said, "What do you think, little sister?" Gang Baoyu even said there was a gap in her heart, and she only filled it when she came, but she had to come every day. How could she not come? Go, who rarely comes here every day. It's a waste of time. It's better to see my sister today, my sister tomorrow, and my sister after tomorrow. Everyone is wrong. One person only takes 1 day's duty every month. It's better to find some more sisters. It's much easier to come here every 6 months. When Lin Daiyu said this, Jia Baoyu thought of dozens of sisters and sisters, who were not as good as immortals. Lin Daiyu suppressed a smile and whispered a word to Shui Baochai. "Sister Bao, look at the silly goose, Pushi." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Wind Rises in the End. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Wind Rises in the End. The next day. Zhou Su was picked up by the maid early or late, dressed and tied his hair, cleaned his face and washed his hands, making him marvel at how ancient wealthy people truly enjoyed themselves. He didn't intend to be independent, he just came and did something on his own. The key is that he also needs this ability to do it. Just a few sets of clothes went around and made him dizzy, not to mention anything else. The little maid brought a tray, with a bowl of water and a plate on top. Zhou Su looked inside and didn't know what was mixed with gray and white. "Dalong, what are you looking at? Wipe your teeth quickly and go to the courtyard for breakfast. Don't make Madam and Grandpa wait in a hurry, it will still affect us." Before and after the beginning of spring, I sorted things out for Zhou Su. As I spoke, the Lang Mao's irritable temperament was okay. He went there in a hurry, but now he's so gentle. Wipe your teeth. Zhou Su suddenly realized that he had heard of brushing teeth in ancient times. Poor people would pull a willow or cotton branch and brush their teeth with clean water, while wealthy people would mix salt with some traditional Chinese medicine to make tooth powder. The soda called green salt is this thing. I picked it up and smelled a strong medicinal smell. I dipped my hand into the water in the bowl, which was still warm. Then, I applied a little tooth powder and pounded it in my mouth. It tasted salty and bitter, with a strong herbal flavor. Gulyalu, Hulyalu, Pu, excited by the strange smell of this tooth powder, my whole body was refreshed. I pounded a few times with a sip of water and spat into the basin on the changing rack. Looking up, he saw in the bronze mirror that his rich and luxurious clothes were bright, and his eyebrows and eyes were shining with a divine morning light. He was truly a brave young man. My original body is only 15 this year, with a slight childishness, but after Zhou Su's mature soul took over, his entire temperament underwent a great change. There was also a calmness in her agile gaze, and when she lifted her lips, she didn't smile foolishly like before. Standing beside her, Li Chuan seemed to see the young appearance of the old master, and her eyebrows and eyes curved with a smile. "Don't be so beautiful, De Lang. If you missed the time, the master should say it again. Just go, Zhou Su touched Xiao Shuai's face, feeling very satisfied, and led his maid out of the room. General Xuanwei's mansion was not big or small, and there was already a wealthy family with a 3-in courtyard in the capital. The front courtyard serves guests, the middle courtyard is the main home, and the backyard is separated by the kitchen courtyard and the residence of maids, women, and servants. Zhou Su lived in the east courtyard, his sister lived in the west courtyard, and his parents lived in the middle hall. After walking through the corridor for less than 2 minutes, they arrived at the middle courtyard. "Father, mother, son, please say hello." Zhou's parents were already sitting at the head of the table, and Zhou Jun waved and smiled. "Cluck, I'll just wait for you. I've been waiting for a long time to dress up, so hurry up and ask my sister to take a look. I look a bit more handsome." "Hee, there's no other sister who looks good. I only scored 3 points for my parents' demeanor, and the remaining 7 points are all with my sister." Zhou Su was very happy when he saw Zhou Jun. He had been raised by his sister since he was young, and he was originally naive and silly. It was Zhou Jun who protected and doted on him. To say that Zhou Junsheng is indeed beautiful, if Zhou Su were to compare him to the beautiful women he had seen before, he could only think of Lu Yupu's version of Princess Xiaomin. Why did you lose your honesty and become slippery-tongued when you fell ill? No wonder you would snatch someone else's beautiful maid as soon as you met." Pulling Zhou Su down, Zhou Jun wrung Zhou Su's face with a funny twist. Zhou's mother watched as her siblings played around, and the quiet home became lively again, feeling very happy. However, what his daughter said was true. Zhou Su used to not know that he was only interested in playing, but now he has really grown up and can't think of that idea. "Girl, you also know that Tiger Idiot is not a child when he grows up. What kind of words do he still act like? If someone sees him, he will still get married or not get married." Zhou's mother gave Zhou Jun a white glance, saying that her children were also calculating that it was time to see someone else with them. The latter spat out his tongue and let go of his hand. In the blink of an eye, the snotty little boy had grown into a man, sitting 1 head taller than her. "Sister, don't talk nonsense. I have already told my father about the Central Plains, and it's not for those maids. Besides, in our family, there are no shortage of Li Chun, Qiu Lu, and Xiao Shui." Zhou Su pursed his lips and fell into a coma for a few days. Others only knew that he was forced to buy a maid from someone and couldn't fight, and they didn't even think about what kind of beauty that naive person in his original body knew. "Oh, then the maids all say that, why don't they blame you? That's for sure. I was planning to go to the mixed market and see what's new then. As I passed by Yunlake restaurant, I heard someone say our family." Zhou Su glanced at his father and saw him with lowered eyebrows and eyes, only eating breakfast. He then suppressed Shui Pan and the others' discussion. "Anyway, it's not very appealing. I just found a reason to teach that group of people a lesson. Who knew they were relatives of the Jia family?" With this statement, Zhou Jun, the mother of Zhou, realized that he was not trying to be a maid. That day, she heard from the maid who was following her that Zhou Su was interested in someone else's maid. They were strange. If it was for any fun, it would be understandable to argue with others. "What did they say about our family? I haven't eaten yet." Zhou Jun was curious and was about to ask a question when he heard Zhou's father casually say, "No matter how quiet the table is, the Zhou family doesn't have much heritage and doesn't pay attention to etiquette. Otherwise, the rule of not saying anything about food or sleep would not allow Zhou Jun to ask questions." Eat. Zhou Su picked up his chopsticks and gave Zhou Jun a glance, and the two of them stopped talking. The breakfast at General Xuanwei's mansion was not very rich. The thick white porridge made of milled rice and a few small dishes were also dry goods. There was no heavy oil and meat in the early morning, which made Zhou Su of later generations have no taste. He only drank a few mouthfuls and then stopped eating. "Huchi, is the food not to the taste, or is it a bit unappetizing? Why only eat these?" When Zhou Su's mother saw that he had drunk a bowl of congee, she stopped eating. She asked him with concern and worried about his health. Zhou Su shook her head and said, "Mom, my son was not hungry after drinking soup last night, so he ate less. Since the food is ready, let's go." Zhou's father is a military soldier, and after taking a few bites, he stood up and went out. Although he knew last night that it was because the Xue family spoke without restraint and said some unpleasant things, Zhou Su had injured someone after all. He also heard that his wife's daughter came to apologize but was unsuccessful. Now that he has returned, the Jia family still needs to go. Speaking of which, he is somewhat involved with these 4 kings and 8 nobles. The capital of Deqian was originally located in the south. In the turbulent times, the imperial Song family gained control of the country, and Emperor Gaozu established the capital. Later, Emperor Qingzu ascended the throne and moved the capital to Bianjing to govern the northern country. The 4 kings and 8 nobles were all stationed in the south, and he was also the governor of Jiangnan Road, working with the salt inspector Lin Ruhai to rectify the southern salt affairs. Those private salt smugglers, big and small, often have secret connections with local clans. The largest ones are not just Jia Wang, Shi Shui, and others. Fortunately, Lin Ruhai has some connections with these clans. Otherwise, it would be difficult to achieve full success this time, and we may have to have some conflicts with them. And Zhou Suyuan, with his contributions coming from his blood and going from his fire, was even accused by a yellow-mouthed child of relying on an old woman to achieve high positions. Today, let's go see what the Jia family looks like without relying on old women. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Rongguo Prefecture. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Rongguo Prefecture. The father and son walked out of the front door, waiting for the groom to bring the horse from the backyard. Zhou Su looked at the black steed he had brought and felt a thumping sensation in his heart. Can he ride a horse? Grandpa, please mount your horse. The servant placed the footstool and asked Zhou Su to go up. Zhou Su scratched his head and looked at his father, who didn't need any padding. He stepped on the stirrups and flipped over to sit firmly on the back of the horse, then looked at Zhou Su. Under the gaze of Zhou's father, he felt that if he had used this footstool, which he only used when he was a child, it would have disappointed him a bit. He carefully pondered his newly mounted movements. With a horizontal heart, I pushed aside the footstool, grabbed the saddle with both hands, and stepped on the stirrups. I imagined that I was on the 2 or 8 bars, and my legs exerted force to jump. Xiu, hey. 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 The horse swayed left and right, almost causing it to fall. Zhou Su hugged the horse's neck and was startled. The groom also came up in time to hold the horse and soothe it. What's going on? Zhou Su is speechless. His movements are very standard. This horse doesn't give face, right? Grandpa's divine power, but this horse is not a war horse in the army, it can't withstand your strength. The groom saw that Zhou Su's face was ugly, so he quickly added a few words to him. It's also strange that this guy doesn't think about his nickname, Tiger Idiot, Tiger Idiot. The ancients didn't have much tiger chatter either. Tiger is a powerful person, while fool is a reckless and foolish person. Can his strength still be weak? This horse is just an ordinary one, it can withstand the strength he exerted just now. Fortunately, he didn't make a fool of himself and fell off the horse. Zhou Su stabilized his figure, and Zhou's father shook his head and said, "Let's go." Oh, Zhou's father pulled the reins and slowly walked forward. Zhou Su responded, this time, he didn't dare to use his strength recklessly. He lightly kicked the horse's belly with his foot, and the horse shook its head and took steps to tap and tap. This time, the father and son went to the Jia mansion without any preparation. They mostly had some specialty products from the south, and the fact that the Jia family came from the south with this item was considered a courtesy. At this moment, Jia mansion had already received a memorial from General Xuanwei's mansion, which was sent by Zhou Suyuan servants in the morning and was now placed on Jia Zheng's desk. Madame Wang glanced at the Buddha beads in her hand, then became a closed-eyed bodhisattva, but her mouth was not the kind of tolerance and magnanimity of a bodhisattva. This week is really a good time for my family to choose. Tomorrow is the day of the new moon and I will rush here. Baoyu has been in pain for a few days but hasn't seen his family ask him a question. What's the matter with this meeting? I'm afraid the old master will come up and treat him without any way to teach him. Not only that, but also General Zhou Suyuan, who was on Jiangnan Road, probably came to pay his respects as soon as he returned to the capital. Moreover, his youngest daughter's mischief may not have been intentional. Madam and old lady take it too seriously. Zheng has also been causing a lot of trouble these days. He has also seen Jia Baoyu's injury, and before he caused trouble, he hit him hard. However, Mrs. Wang reminds him every day to participate in the Zhou Suyuan book during the court meeting. But how can he say such a small matter? To provoke laughter from his colleagues, and besides, there is also a Empress Dowager in the Zhou family. Do you really consider her as a clay bodhisattva? What is this, sir? If it's not the flesh falling off your body, don't you feel sorry? Have you ever seen Baoyu these days? Lying in bed in pain, unable to eat or drink, how can I not take it seriously? Mrs. Wang put away her prayer beads and stood up to look at Zheng. There's no escape from the word reason in this world. That little beast hit me for no reason. I can't just let it go. If the master doesn't succeed, I'll just seek help from my elder brother. After finishing speaking, he got up and left the room. The maid hurriedly followed him, and Zheng raised his hand and put it down again. He looked at the prayer post on the table and, after a moment's thought, gave instructions to the door. Go and invite the old master to come with the old master of Ningguo Prefecture. Yes, sir. The boy hurriedly sent someone away. Zheng called his brother and Zhen because he was a civil servant and did not deal with generals. Zhen she was at least a military officer, a first-class general and a third-grade general. It's easy to talk to General Zhou Suyuan with both of them present. It is said that Zhou Su and his father Zhou Suyuan left the mansion and turned towards the West Street and the Imperial Street. Previously, the streets outside the general's mansion were sparsely populated, and Zhou Su thought it was because there was no one around too early. It wasn't until he turned the street corner and arrived at Yujie that he finally saw the ancient scenery, which opened his eyes. Yujie was originally used by the royal family for grand ceremonies such as offering sacrifices to the outside world. It stretches for more than 10 miles and is about 200 steps wide. Not only was it a street, but Zhou Su thought it was a square, with a visual distance of nearly 300 meters. Prohibited in the streets, it is used by the royal family. There are hundreds of meters on each side for the people to walk, from the gate of Xuanwei in the imperial city to the south gate. On both sides of the imperial street, there are tens of thousands of shops and merchants in most of the capital city, each with street intersections extending backwards. They are the central organs of the imperial court, the residences of imperial relatives, relatives of the country, and civil and military officials. Zhou Su's eyes were overwhelmed with excitement as he looked around. He only wanted to go down and take a stroll and have some fun. He knew it was just his original thoughts. Passing through the tiled houses, there are various theatrical performances day and night, including acrobatics, puppetry, acrobatics, cinemas, storytelling, and more. In the morning, the shops have food from both north and south, with a strong aroma of noodles, rice balls, and milk and cheese. Small vendors strolling through the streets and alleys are shouting and selling. There were thousands of men, women, and pedestrians, shoulder to shoulder, not inferior to the style of later generations. This made Zhou Su uncertain whether it was the end of the Song dynasty or the beginning of the Yuan dynasty or the end of the Yuan dynasty or the beginning of the Ming dynasty. Not long after walking further inside, there are numerous gold and silver treasures, antique and jade shops, which are even more luxurious than the shops I saw earlier. It seems that I have arrived at the gathering place of wealthy families. There are not as many people here as those who have just entered the street, but there are many silk and satin people. Looking up, you can see that the imperial city is tall and majestic, with 3 doors facing north and south. The closer you are to the imperial city, the more prestigious your identity becomes. For example, on Rongning 2nd Street, Zhou Fu's horse head turned and led Zhou Su into a street with red tiles and high walls on both sides, which was more than 10 meters wide. Zhou Fu asked the Malay couple under Zhou Su to lead their horses. After walking 100 meters, I saw a 7 or 8 meter high and 10 meter long archway with 3 gilded characters on a vermilion plaque. Rongguo Prefecture. Upon closer inspection, there are also annotations and small characters. The imperial decree was issued in December of the 3rd year of the Qingwu reign, and the emotions were personally written by Emperor Qingzu of the Great Qian dynasty. No wonder he dismounted early and walked. Looking further ahead, there is another one several hundred meters away, which has been changed to Ningguo Prefecture. TSK. Now Zhou Su finally understood what it means to be a wealthy and prestigious family. Just this archway alone is more imposing than other families. Behind the archway, there is an ear room, and behind the ear room is the main entrance. There are several doors where people come, dressed and dignified, unlike ordinary people. They quickly greet them and ask questions. I don't know if this old man is busy. Zhou Suyuan and his son Zhou Su came to pay their respects to the member's foreign minister, and they have already submitted their invitation. Zhou Suyuan said a faint word before paying no attention. Upon hearing this, Mensi quickly went into the side door to inquire with the front yard butler. Not long after, the southeast corner side door opened and a few people walked out. The leader, dressed in luxurious clothes and with a smile on his face, bowed and bowed. But in front of General Xuanwei, the young governor of Rongguo, Zhou Rui, has met the general. My master is not a first-class general, and General Weilai has been waiting for a long time. Please enter the mansion, please. Calling Zhou Rui to extend his hand for an invitation, Zhou's father walked step by step towards Rongguo mansion with his hands down. Zhou Su stared at this servant for a while and couldn't help but curse in his heart. Damn it, it turned out to be a butler. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Jia Zhen, Jia Zheng, Jia Shi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Jia Zhen, Jia Zheng, Jia Shi. Within Rongguo Prefecture. The maidservants in the flower hall serve tea carefully one by one, and the elders of Rongning Mansion are all present. Who dares not work with heart? Suyuan has been frequently heard of him since he arrived this week. Since serving as the governor of Jiangnan, several rooms in the old house on the south side have eaten his belongings. If it weren't for Uncle Lin's intervention, he would have had to take advantage of the official position. Humph, he has such great authority. Jia Zhen put down the tea cup and opened her mouth calmly. When she heard that Jia Zheng had invited him to meet Zhou Suyuan, she felt a little displeased when she thought about the shabby things in the south this year. As the head of the Jia family, Jia Zhen naturally approached his relatives when they encountered any official matters. He also knew that the old relatives in Jinling relied on the prestige of the Rongning second mansion to provide people with many conveniences. It's just to make some connections and take care of a few small shops, which is also worth it. However, Zhou Suyuan insisted on it. Jia Shi nodded when he heard Jia Zhen's words. If it weren't for such an unruly old man, how could there have been such a reckless little beast who couldn't buy, snatch, and sell at the feet of the emperor, and even beat Baoyu Shuepan so badly? According to me, I would have written a note and handed it to the imperial court, never giving up. It was supposed to be Jia Zhen's words, but looking at what Jia Zheng said, it was as if Jia Baoyu was his own son. Little did he know that Jia Baoyu was beaten and he felt happy in his heart. The old lady always thought that the second son was capable and didn't like him. Now, her old man's precious lump has been injured and lying in bed, and enemies see how he is doing. Both brothers and nephews are so angry. Zheng, who was not supposed to be involved, furrowed his brows slightly and thought to himself that calling him too might be a wrong move. Don't make this small matter too big. Grandpa Zhen, Grandpa, General Xuanwei is here. Lai Er, the steward of Rongguo Mansion, hurried in to report. Zheng looked at Zhen and Shi, and secretly said that they were both super titles, so he would not get up. He had better go by himself. Got it, the guest is here. Let's go outside the hall to welcome him. Don't let a martial artist laugh at me. The Jia family doesn't know how to behave. Humph, can Xiao also be considered a third-grade fan? I heard that I have gained some credit from following Ruhai this time, and I estimate I will be promoted. When Zheng left the hall, Jia Shi and Zhen still talked about Zhou Suyuan. Zhou Su followed the steward of Rongguo Mansion, Zhou Rui, and only then did he know what a high-gate mansion was. Along the way, the rockery courtyard had a unique scenery, with plum blossoms, orchids, bamboo, and chrysanthemums each having their own unique strengths. This is still the Jia family, who have not yet built the Grand View Garden. They are truly wealthy and luxurious. Walking around the copying corridor without stopping, the maids on the road covered their faces and peeked at Zhou Su, then theorized whether it was a guest from whose family or a relative from somewhere who came to visit. I don't know how long it took, but Zhou Rui, who was leading the way, suddenly quickened his pace and spoke to a middle-aged man. Lai Guanshi, the person arrived. Well, the master already knows, you go. Zhou Rui nodded, turned around and smiled at Zhou Suyuan and his son, then turned around and left. Zhou Su knew the prestige of the Jia family. In his memory, the Jia family was probably the only generation to inherit titles from their ancestors, without many high-ranking officials. He never expected that his father, a third-rank general with real power, would only be welcomed by butlers. No wonder the Jia family was so proud when a tall building collapsed, and there was no one to help. They deserved to be left in a white and clean place. The butler surnamed Lai didn't speak very politely either. He only said a word of invitation and headed down a corridor, which was quite mysterious, like a seventh-rank official in front of a prime minister's door. This time, just briefly turning around the pavilion, I saw a hall with flowers and willows on both sides that were not like early winter. In front of the hall stood a person who arched his hand from a distance and said, "General Xuanwei, Jia has made a mistake in welcoming him from afar. How tolerant of his impoliteness. The waiter is serious. It was impolite to disturb you today." Originally, Lord Lin learned that I had returned to Beijing earlier and asked me to bring some filial piety and respect to Mr. Jia. I returned from Jiangnan last night and couldn't disturb you. I just came today. Having been in the officialdom for so long, Zhou Suyuan no longer seems to have the temperament to fight on the battlefield. He naturally knows how to bend around these old masters. After chatting with each other for a few words, Zhou Suyuan sternly scolded, without asking for their purpose or expressing their intention. "Yi Zhai, why don't you come and visit Mr. Jia?" Zhou Su was speechless and could only bow forward. He exclaimed that he had seen Jia Xuanwei before him. Zheng looked at the brave young man in front of him, who was as tall as him and had a handsome appearance. In stark contrast to Jia Baoyu's powder and makeup, he looked at Zhou Suyuan and asked, "Is this your son? He is truly talented and extraordinary, and will definitely be a pillar of the great Qian dynasty in the future." Yuan Weilong jokingly said, "Since childhood, my dog has been reckless and foolish, and there are many shortcomings in his actions. I don't know how many troubles he has caused over the years, which is really frustrating. If a child becomes mischievous, it's okay as long as their nature is not bad." The two of them mocked Zhou Su with their teasing, one cursing himself silly and the other saying he was crazy. Zheng and Zhou Suyuan set the tone in a few words, and it was considered that they had pressed the button on this matter. It was not a big deal, but rather a small matter. They were willing to do so. It seems all right for the time being. Zheng extended his hand to welcome Zhou Suyuan into the house, and then ordered someone to invite Jia Baoyu and Jiao Yan to talk to Zhou Su in a small generation. Zhou Suyuan followed Zheng into the hall and was meeting with Jia Shi and Jia Zhen. The eyes of the three people meet. Although they have prominent titles, they are both descendants of the ancestors. Where is the right place to kill Zhou Suyuan, who started his family with a knife and a bullet? Seeing his eyes are hard to be sharp, Jia Zhen and Jia Shi simultaneously cast their eyes aside. Jia Zhen introduced Zhou Suyuan to him when she saw this. This is my nephew and the patriarch of my Jia family, General Jia Zhen, and this is my brother Jia Shi, the first-class general. I thought that the general would come to visit you. You are all Wusun or something. Jia Zhen, when Jia Shi heard what Jia Zheng said, he stood up proudly. After careful thinking, both of us are peerless titles, and you can compete with the third-rank general. Just sit there and wait for Zhou Suyuan to salute. Zhou Suyuan secretly sighed in his heart, pitying Jia Daishan. Jia Daihua and his two companions were once considered pillars of the court. Now, seeing that the successors of Rongning Mansion were almost identical, Zhou Suyuan shook his sleeves and arched his hand, saying, I have met two generals, Jiangnan Road Jidushi. You are empty, I am real, and I am on par. General Zhou, hello. I heard that you have made a big move in Jiangnan this time. We often hear about your authority in the capital, Jia Zhen said calmly. Since you have arrived today, she said. It's all thanks to your Majesty's great fortune that he has done some of his duty. Speaking of which, it's still Mr. Lin who has more authority. You. Jia Zhen choked on Zhou Suyuan's soft knife and was so angry that she couldn't speak. What did he mean? Only you, Zhou Suyuan, kept your duty. Isn't our Jia family a loyal and patriotic minister? It's unreasonable to use Lin Ruhai to deceive him. Hey, Brother Zhen, I won't mention these things today. General Zhou came here as if he had entrusted him with filial piety for the old lady. Since everything else has passed, I won't mention it. Jia Zheng knew that bad things needed to be done quickly. Jia Shi turned his eyes to the young man at the door and asked suddenly. Are you the maniac who injured my nephew? I thought there was no update until it was gone, but today the editor gave me a big slap, tears in my eyes. I also need to thank my book friends for their support, so that the editor can give me the opportunity. Thank you all. Speak less empty words and promise to plant flags. Rush and it's done. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Shared Stinks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Shared Stinks, you are the maniac who injured my nephew. Over there, Jia Zhenggang arranged Zhou Suyuan to sit down and let the little servant girl serve tea. When he heard Jia Shi's question, he was immediately the first to. He had known that he would not ask them to come here. Zhou Suyuan was not rude this time, and he was easy to talk. On the contrary, Jia Shi is aggressive and out of style. But asking the kid. Zhou Su looked around and saw that there was no one else besides him, and Zhou Suyuan ignored Zhou Su to see how he responded. Except you, who dares to buy, rob and sell things in the capital city. You are angry and hurt people. I don't know how you teach them. They are all so crazy. Jia Shi looked at Zhou Suyuan and sneered at your duty. Your son hurt people, but the truth is that you don't have to justify going to your majesty. The boy ate too much alcohol that day and didn't know what he had done. He also heard from his family that he had come to visit the bro in the mansion to apologize to him. Zhou Su replied to Jia Shi without arrogance. He had discussed with Zhou's father that if the Jia family was aggressive, Shui Pan's disrespectful words on that day would be charged. If the Jia family only played around as a child, it would be better to bring Lin Ruhai to show some respect. After speaking, he turned around and bowed to Jia Zheng, saying that he couldn't live up to it, but that day it was a careless mistake. It's okay, it's not a big deal. But in the future, don't drink too much. Firstly, it can harm your health when you're young, and secondly, it's not beautiful if you cause trouble. As a Lai family member, take the Zhou family's little brother to search for treasures in Jade, and then inform Miss Lin that her father has brought some items for her. Yes, sir. A young servant came forward and bowed to Zheng and others. He turned around and smiled as Zhou Su reached out and said, "Brother, come with me." Zhou Su looked at Zhou's father, and when he saw the latter, he nodded slightly and followed the servant directly. In the inner courtyard of Jia Mansion, a maid hurriedly entered Jia Baoyu's small courtyard and saw Lin Daiyu, Shui Baochai, Jia Yingchun, Tan Chun, Shichuan, and Shi Shangyun, among other girls, all in Jia Baoyu's house. She hurriedly bowed and said hello. "Where do you come from in such a hurry?" Shiren grabbed the little girl and stood up. The latter called out to his sister and said, "Just now, the master sent a message that the old master of the Zhou family brought his son to our mansion. Let Baoyu and the second master talk with him." "Zhou's? Which Zhou's?" Shi Shangyun rushed up and asked, "Where did that maid know?" She only knew that a guest had arrived, shook her head and bowed before leaving. "Isn't it the guy who injured Brother Ai and Brother Xuepan that day?" Shi Shangyun's eyes twitched, and others also guessed a rough idea. Jia Baoyu also remembered that the person who injured him was not the Zhou family of General Xuanwei. Why did the meeting come? Suddenly, something came to mind, and his face changed. The other sisters did not notice the change in Baoyu, but Shui Baochai looked at him and thought to herself, why did Baoyu hear that person come and be so scared? Did he look too fierce or scared him that day? She asked, "Didn't you also go that day? What does that person look like?" When asked about this, the sisters remembered that the incident was urgent that day, and they were wearing draped hats. They never saw clearly what that person looked like, whether it was beautiful or smelly. They only knew that the guy stopped Xuepan and said a few words before fighting. That's chaotic. How dare our sisters come forward to see it? They're just far away, seeing their tall stature. Lin Daiyu was also there that day, but although she had a few small sisters, her body was the weakest and she was closely guarded by the maid. There was no way she could see people, and everyone else nodded, each being protected by the maid and looking at Baoyu. Look at what I'm doing again. At that time, I was far away and even suffered this hard blow. If I were close, wouldn't it be half my life lost? The bruise on Baoyu's face completely dissipated, and he couldn't pretend anymore. Fortunately, his father hasn't come these days, and Mrs. Wang and Mrs. Jia have been doting on him, so no one has bothered him. Shi Shangyun was the most straightforward. Since he didn't see it at that time, he brought it to his door today and went to take a look. Sisters, it's hard to come up with any ideas here. Why don't we go with Baoyu too? Firstly, he bullied my beloved brother and I even went to settle accounts with him. Secondly, I can't really see what kind of fool he is, okay? Nonsense. These are all girls who haven't left the court yet. How could they gather around a man and say something like that? Let the grandma and mom know now. You're much better. Shui Baochai was so angry and funny that she pinched the little girl's face. She would cover it tightly when she went out on weekdays. It's better for you to send her to her door, whether you're looking at people or showing them, but it's not outside. In her own mansion, the girls are inevitably more daring, and even though they are a bit tempted, no one dares to take the lead. How about this? Didn't the master ask Baoyu to accompany that person to talk? Later, Brother Ai will take him closer to the backyard. Isn't this good? Shi Shangyun came up with a solution, and everyone praised it. Even Shui Baochai did not object, but he only suffered Baoyu. Since the master spoke up and his sisters encouraged him, he seemed to be afraid of that person at home and had to go. Zhou Su was led to a small flower hall by a young man from the Lai family. The interior was decorated with exquisite decorations, all of which were unknown to Zhou Su. But just by looking at them, he knew they must be very valuable. No wonder even if these two families declined, they also declined due to other reasons. In terms of money alone, it would probably take these few more than 10 to 20 years to be completely defeated. As he was observing, footsteps could be heard outside. But Zhou's brother. My younger brother is Zhou Su. I wonder which brother you are. The newcomer is 8 feet tall and has a handsome appearance. He is elegant and handsome, not inferior to himself. How could this small world of red mansions give birth to such peerless Zhou Lang and Panin? He, brother Su, this is Jiao Yan. Just call me second brother and come and sit down. It was none other than Jiao Yan, Jia Shi's son, who was called Second Master Lian. He was a normal person in the Red Chamber. Although he had no great ability and was also greedy, he was a person with bottom line. The Jia family bullied men and women a lot, and he never acted with those methods. Zhou Su was very impressed by his wife. So it's Lin Gu. I've heard a lot about him. It's a pleasure to meet you, huh, it's easy to say, Jiao Yan grabbed Zhou Su's hand, and for a moment, he felt a little goosebumps with enthusiasm. It was rumored that the south wind in this yard was so good, so this guy wouldn't be interested in labor management, right? My fist has hardened. Zhou Su really overthought it. From that day on, he heard that Jia Baoyu and Shui Pan had been beaten up and bedridden. Jiao Yan was in a particularly good mood for some reason, possibly due to his situation in the Jia mansion. Compared to his father beating or scolding him, he was not as respectable as a servant as a long-term wife and grandson. Compared to him, the people in the mansion have limited respect for him, and he is not as good as his wife Wang Shifeng. In short, he is quite a pitiful person. Today, I heard that Zhou Jiazheng asked him to speak with guests, and he was not willing to do so. But when I asked him clearly, it was the family that attacked Jia Baoyu, and he came with great enthusiasm. Laugh as he pleases, say as he pleases, the two people we first met are like old friends, especially friendly. End of this chapter.